Welcome to this channel. In this episode, we will discuss an interesting subject of the job market, moonlighting. What is moonlighting? The term moonlighting literally means to have a second job in addition to one's regular employment. In short, a side job in addition to the primary job. The term moonlight originated in US and the employees took the second job and does it at night. As the job is done at night time, so it is called moonlight job. As the job is done at night, so the light of the moon is represented here in the word as moonlighting. But in UK, the term represents the second job during the continuance of the primary job. The term moonlight job comes from the Irish gang in 1880s who used to commit theft and murder at night, and they were called moonlighter. Later in 1950s, the term started to represent the second job. It is presumed that such second job were done under the light of the moon at night, as the primary job time schedule were daytime. So we can say moonlighting is the second job or freelancing work by an employee does after the scheduled primary job time frame. Mostly it is done secretly, keeping the employers in dark. On the basis and nature of the second job, moonlighting can be classified as 1. Quarter moonlighting, 2. Half moonlighting, 3. Full moonlighting, and 4. Blue moonlighting. When the second job is part-time, is quarter moonlighting. If it is more than the part-time, it is half moonlighting. And when the second job is full-time, then the second job is called the full moonlighting. And when the employee failed to manage both full-time job simultaneously is called the blue moonlighting. To understand this subject better, we have to understand why the employee choose the moonlighting. People choose to take the second job in continuance of the primary full-time job mainly because of the psychological and financial factors. If we look into the psychological factor, mostly it is seen the insecurity prevailing in the primary job, or in the organization in which the employee is working is not stable or not getting the salary on time. This psychological factor forces the employee to have the second job after the scheduled time frame of the primary job. There are other factors that an individual borne in mind, such as where he will spend time in his micro society. It becomes obvious for him to choose the option to engage himself in the second or freelancing job. Another factor which the society is facing nowadays is the competition for richness, which incline the employee to opt for the second job. The psychological factor for becoming more rich than other force subconsciously the employee to opt for the second or freelancing job. Another psychological factor which act subconsciously in the mind of the employee is not getting the recognition at the workplace for various factors. Less appreciation for better effort also acts subconsciously. Next comes the financial factor. In today's world of commodification, man's thrust for the more valuable commodities and luxurious life push the employee to look for the second job. At the same time, the fear for future insecurity also pushed the employee to look for the second job. Everybody's family condition and responsibility is not same. The need is not fulfilled by the salary of the primary job. Even though unwilling, the employee is forced to search the second job. Both the psychological and financial factors are interrelated and interconnected. We see a gap in salary and remuneration between the two efficient persons in the two different sectors of the job market. While discussing this subject, we cannot restrain ourselves in the micro-centric view. In India, if we look of the necessity of the skilled workers and its availability, there is a big gap, which enlarges the opportunity of the skilled worker to work beyond the primary job. Now the question arises in our mind, doing the second job or moonlighting is unethical or ethical? Doing the side job or second job is not a new concept in the job industry. Moonlighting is done by the employees in various parts of the world. to ensure the financial stability and to improve their efficiencies and skill in their trade. The term ethical and morality goes together. In case of moonlighting, there is a fine line which differentiates the ethical and unethical. There is no harm in doing more than one job, subject to the certain conditions. If the following conditions are properly maintained or distant, then it seems to me there is no harm. But closeness or not properly maintained obviously bring the unethical practice. Let us now discuss when the second job of an employee is unethical. 1. It is expected that the employee shall give the best of his output with sincerity in favor of the organization where he is primarily employed, but he failed to do so due to his second employment. That is unethical. 2. Secrets of the trade interest. If the employee works in an organization as second job and such organization is a rival to the organization providing the primary employment to the employee, and if the employee reveals the secrecy to the secondary employer, then it is unethical because it costs the primary employer's interest. 3. If there is a clause in the employment agreement that the employee cannot take up any job during the continuance of the present employment and the employee does so and take up the second job behind the curtain or does any freelancing job or does any job contrary to the employment agreement, then that is unethical. 4. Using the techniques, technology and tricks of the primary employer to satisfy the secondary employer, that is also unethical. But there are certain scenarios. Let us take for the discussion a story. Mr. A is a clerk in an organization, and after the job hours, he works as an insurance agent or a private tutor. Does such act of earning of Mr. A is unethical? No, certainly not, if the employment agreement allows him to do so. In the today's HR policy, we generally find in the employment agreement a clause is inserted called non-compete clause, and if it is violated, then it is unethical. Now the question arises in our mind, is moonlighting legal in India? In India, there is no codified law that directly addresses moonlighting. So, the reference of different statutes need for understanding the legal position of moonlighting in India. The non-compete clause generally found in the employment contract is guided by Section 27 of the Indian Contract Act. This prohibits the employee from taking up the employment with the other employer during the continuance of the present employment. Section 60 of the Factories Act of 1948 prohibits dual employment for the workers. But the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946 allows dual employment, but the interest of the employer is protected here. The huge chunk of the workforce is outside the purview of the Factories and Industrial Act. This chunk are governed and guided by the state enacted Shops and Establishment Act. The policy under the Shop and Establishment Act differ from one state to another. Section 65 of the Bombay Shop and Establishment Act of 1948 and Section 9 of the Delhi Shop and Establishment Act of 1954 restricts dual employment. The courts generally bend towards restrictions of dual employment. Such inclination is found in the various judgments. 1. Niranjan Shankar Golikari versus the Century Spinning and Manufacturing Company, Supreme Court 1967. 2. Wipro Limited versus Beckman Coulter International, Delhi High Court 2006. 3. Metso Papers India Private Limited versus Mr. V. Gokulakrishnanan, Delhi District Court 2019. 4. Lumpin Limited versus Sri Satyendra Jadhav and others, Bombay High Court 2018. 5. Gulbar versus Presiding Officer Industrial Tribunal, Punjab and Haryana High Court 2016. Let us sum up the entire episode. In the current scenario of the legal position, one thing we can say about the employees who are not under the Industrial Relation or Factories Act must be governed by the non-compete clause of the employment contract or by the Shop and Establishment Act of the respective state. The IT and ITES employees are generally governed by the Shop and Establishment Act of the state. If the employee override the non-compete clause, that tantamount to be unethical as well as illegal. The courts generally tend to go against the employee if such employee break the non-compete clause. There is a chance of business loss as the probability goes higher for the leakage of the business and trade secrets exposures when it comes to the dual employment. But in India today, there is a great debate among the entrepreneurs in the matter of moonlighting. One half is greatly against the moonlighting, another half is supporting the moonlighting to a certain extent.